You see on your bulletin, it says the presentation of our Lord and the fourth Sunday after the Epiphany. As important as the presentation is, I chose the fourth Sunday after the Epiphany because I just couldn't escape this Micah reading and the Sermon on the Mount that we're looking at in Bible study. However, I want you to know the presentation is important. It's exactly 40 days after Christmas, and it's rare that February 2nd falls on a Sunday. It's a nice Catholic tradition. The Roman Catholic Church used to call it Purification Sunday. It had a Marian focus as well, and the readings are from Luke. So for those who wanted to keep their Christmas decorations up a little longer past Epiphany, this is the last official day. After this, Christ gets grown. So just a little footnote on the presentation. Normally I would go for that, but Micah and Sermon on the Mount, how could you pass that by? If we know anything or any verse from Micah, we should all know verse 6-8. I think this is even up on my humble picture on the narthex. Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with your God. Amen. I can sit down right now.
My Lord.
Do justice,
my Lord.
Love kindness, walk humbly with your God. Amen. It sounds so simple, doesn't it?
It does sound that way.
Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly. We can memorize that. But on a closer look, is it really that simple? How can we be sure we're seeking God's justice and not our own justice or our own revenge?
My Lord.
How are we to love kindness? Or is it we just like niceness? It's nice to be nice to nice people. How do we walk in humility without feeling like a fool? Feeling humiliated? Fortunately, the gospel today helps us with the command from Micah, with another most popular text from the Sermon on the Mount. Today we have the beginning of it. Here in the tradition of the Old Testament prophets and teachers, we have an excellent teacher and guide in Jesus Christ. And for those of us not in Bible study, you could visit us one of these days. It would be nice to see you. But we're talking about the Gospel of Matthew. This is year A, and it's all about Matthew. Matthew, as you know, is the first book of the New Testament. It's not the oldest, so why do you think it's the first one? It was supposedly the one that has the most continuity with the Old Testament. Matthew has an ear for a word for Jewish listeners. It's the one that's supposedly closely aligned with the Hebrew Bible that we call the Old Testament. And the Hebrew Bible is all about Moses. All about Moses. So Matthew has a point and an argument that you don't have to look to Moses no more. It's all about Jesus. And we know that Moses is coming down from the mountain with his 10 commandments. In Matthew, Jesus stays up on that mountain, takes a seat, and reads these Beatitudes. The Beatitudes are the blessed are, or the happy are, or as Robert Schuller said back in the day, the be happies. This is the most famous part of the Sermon on the Mount. And these Beatitudes are all about justice. And I think for Black History Month, justice is an important theme. Amen. This is a word for those lacking justice, at least in the first 4 verses. And the final 4 are those who are working for justice. Another thing that the hearers would have known about, you remember in the Old Testament when Joseph brought his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, to be blessed by his father Jacob. And they said that Jacob was beginning to lose his sight. And he asked him to bless Ephraim and Manasseh. And Jacob can't see that well anymore, so he crosses his hand and blessed them. And Joseph is like, no, Dad. This is the oldest one. He's the one who's supposed to get the blessing. And he says, shut up. He's getting the blessing. Jesus kind of does this on the Sermon on the Mount. Don't you mean blessed are the rich? Don't you mean blessed are the powerful? Don't you mean blessed are those in Rome who has authority? Don't you mean? No. Blessed are the poor. Blessed are those who are mourning. Blessed are those who are meek. Jesus knows what he's doing. These verbs are kind of tricky. are, and will be. When we pay attention to the future tense, they will be comforted, they will inherit, they will be filled. It's easy to hear these as a series of promises or rewards to be allotted in the afterlife and the new creation at the end of times. But those of you who remember your grammar, this is future tense. This will happen. This is not subjunctive. It would be nice if it would happen. This will happen.
My Lord.
Jesus says so. That's the end of it.
My.
Henry Nouwen talks about optimism versus hope. Optimism of those who kind of have a positive thinking attitude. I got a feeling this is going to happen. Hope is knowing that Jesus can work it out and will do it. So these are messages of hope. And you don't dare ask why. I remember, I'm sure a number of us can remember, if your mother or father would say, go take this outside, and you go, why? Because I said so. If anyone were to dare ask Jesus, why are these are the ones going to be blessed? Because I said so. No doubt, these promises will hold true in the new creation. But Jesus is saying this is going to happen in this time. I know many of the slaves must have thought, it may not happen in my time, my personal history, but this is going to happen in human history. Liberation is going to happen before the end of the world. I don't have to wait to go to heaven, or my grandson is not going to have to wait to go to heaven. I'm fighting for him or her right now. These are going to happen. When we mourn, when we're hungry, and when we're being persecuted. Perhaps Jesus is calling us to a deeper, more challenging understanding. Twice he says, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Just a bit earlier in the Gospel of Matthew, we're told that from the beginning of his teaching, Jesus proclaimed, the kingdom of heaven has come near. It's so close. You could almost touch it. If the kingdom of heaven is truly at hand, then all the blessings Jesus mentions are not afterlife consolation prizes, but present tense realities. Now I hear in schools, everyone gets a certificate or a trophy for trying, for being affirmed, for showing up. This is beyond that. Jesus is saying all of those are going to get rewarded. Blessed are the poor in spirit, those who've been emptied out. They have the kingdom of heaven now. Blessed are those who mourn, who've had so many losses in their lives. Jesus says they are going to be comforted. They are being comforted now because I said so. Blessed are the meek, Lord have mercy, who really go through it and catch it. They are inheriting the earth. Hallelujah. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. They are being filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they are receiving mercy. I get excited and emotional every time I read these and hear them. In this light, the blessings become both strength and guidance for that Micah passage. With this under our belt, we can do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with our God. Yeah. Justice in our time typically uses the tools of punishment and may even slightly touch upon reparations. In a justice system that's working well, the innocent are protected, the vulnerable are shielded, and equity is ensured. When it's not working so well, justice protects the powerful and disproportionately condemn communities of color, immigrants, women. Justice in the new kingdom of God relies on mercy and righteousness. Our baptismal covenant calls us to strive for justice and peace among all people, respect the dignity of every human being. Our tools for this heavenly justice system are mercy and righteousness and peacemaking. If we use these tools to do justice, look at the blessings that's going to come. You're going to receive mercy. You're going to be filled. You're going to call and know that you are a child of God. You know, I needed to be reminded of this because I worry about our justice system and our penal system. You know, the penal system, the jails, at one time were concerned about rehabilitation. I told someone a week ago that we were going to meet and serve ex-offenders. He said, no, Chris, they're not called ex-offenders. They're called returned citizens. I said, that's cute. Returned citizens. Are they returning citizens? Do they get the rights of citizens?
No.
I mean, that's something that we could live into. I like that. That's the goal. If only they were returned citizens. You know, so many benefits and privileges were taken away. They still can get a GED, but college programs used to be in prison. For those who had high school diploma, they could get a degree. And we said that's a waste of money for them. Is that justice?
My Lord.
No.
You know, I was reading about the Me Too movement. I'm embarrassed to say I did not know that much about it. I just had this picture of white actresses who were oppressed by big moguls, sexually assaulted. And I slightly knew that a black woman was involved and maybe even a leader of it. But it wasn't until last week I read about it. Tamara Burke, the founder, was at Northwestern for MLK Day. And she said she started this for poor black girls in the projects.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's true.
Who were being raped, as she
True.
was when she was in the Bronx.
That's right.
And it was some actress who saw that hashtag. It suddenly became a movement for white women. I'm like, history repeats itself.
Child, listen.
The language of freedom and independence was the slaves, but the founders of the country heard Independence Day and used it against England. I'm like, wow, how much changes. But she was so gracious.
That's the thing.
She said, this is for everyone who's been sexually assaulted. The white actresses and the poor black and brown girls alike.
Amen.
I'm like, wouldn't that be something that they could work together? If they could use their resources to bring rape counseling centers to the schools and the communities. I mean, there's a way that everyone can benefit from this. And lo and behold, to include boys.
Well.
Me Too movement. The blessings are not only a reward, but a source of motivation, a source of guidance. Because we receive mercy, we have to extend mercy. We have to be a model of being merciful. Because we have been forgiven and restored, we are strengthened to forgive others.
Amen.
Help me, Holy Ghost. We are to work for peace and reconciliation because we are filled with the Spirit of God. We have hunger and thirst more and more and more to see righteousness in our world. But what about those times when it's hard to see righteousness in this world? It's kind of hard to see that right now. What about when we are persecuted or we are mourning another loss or when we feel so empty in our spirit? Jesus doesn't change his words. He assures us we are blessed. Even at the present time, even in the midst of all of this pain, he says you're blessed. Perhaps he's even teaching us that at such moments, we are most open to receive and perceive the grace of God. It's something about going through that opens your eyes, that you're able to see more clearly. I don't know why it's that way, but it is.
Yes.
In the midst of persecution and slander and just being talked about, Jesus says, rejoice and be glad. Come on, Jesus, what are you talking about? Rejoice, be glad. They talked about me. They talked about the prophets before you. We are walking in the kingdom of heaven, saints, as well as an unjust world.
Hallelujah.
When we mourn, when we're tossed about, it's right. It's only human to have our anger stirred up and our grief. How vivid are those moments when the presence and compassion of God break through. It was interesting. I went to go hear the St. Olaf Choir on Friday at Fourth Presbyterian. A friend of mine for many years decided to go check them out. And I was not in a good space. I did not want to deal with Fourth Presbyterian and Magnificent Mile. And Anton Armstrong has those children sounding like angels. I mean, they were just so beautiful voices. I forgot I was mad. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm feeling different all of a sudden. That's what the Beatitudes are about. We need to hear more music that changes our lives. Adrian Dunsinger's, St. Martin's Choir. Jesus assures us that we have the kingdom of heaven just when we feel the poorest in spirit. Just when you feel the emptiest. He says, keep on keeping on. Keep reaching out because you're so close. I mentioned this before. I loved it when my nieces and nephews, I would tell them when I get off work I was going to bring them a treat. They could taste it. They knew it was coming. And when they got older, oh, quit lying, you ain't gonna bring nothing. I'm like, what happened to that faith? I know this is coming. Jesus said, hold out, this is coming. It is near. Hold on. Just when you want to give up. Humility is all about letting go of our need to know everything and control everybody. Humility is all about letting go of our need to know everything and control everybody. Yes. The less we have of ourselves, the more of God we have. Amen. When we can finally let go of asking God, why? Why my son? Why my husband? Why my wife? Why must I feel alone? Why must we experience and witness all this evil in the world? When we are given the blessing of letting go, being still, being silent, you can find that space where God is working in. Yes. I'm right there with you. I know it hurts. But I'm right there with you. Yes. To be meek is to set aside the sense of our own power. When we stop trying to control our surroundings, we discover our freedom to enjoy the gift of the world. The Sermon on the Mount of the Beatitudes call us above all to be open and let God be God.
Hallelujah.
We don't see God until we see the face of Christ in others. Yes. And we learn to do that. We learn to see that. We learn to do that by pursuing justice and kindness towards everybody. I didn't hear no amen there.
Amen.
We learn to do that by pursuing justice and kindness towards everybody.
Amen.
Much better. We don't see God until we stop trying to control and begin to learn to walk humbly. Do justice. Love kindness. When we practice doing justice, loving kindness, and walking in humility, the Holy Spirit of God continues to work in our hearts, purifying us. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they see God. Amen. I think this is a wonderful thing to hold on to for Black History Month and every month. Yes. The Spirit is working with us. It may never get easy. Our ancestors knew that. But perhaps it is simple after all. Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with your God. Have you remembered that? Can we say that together? Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly. Again, do justice, love kindly, walk humbly. One more time. Do justice, love kindly, walk humbly with your God. The African American ancestors always talked about walking. Walking. Walk in the kingdom of God. Be comforted in the kingdom of God, inherit the earth, be filled with righteousness, receive mercy and extend mercy. My brothers and sisters, you can and will see God. because you're God's children.
Amen.
Rejoice and be glad in that.
Amen.
Blessed are you, St. Mark.